Professor Park's fingers trembled as he adjusted his glasses. For 6 days straight, he had monitored the deep space array at the Guaxian Observatory. The signal had appeared again, exactly on schedule. "It's back," he whispered to the empty room. The pattern pulsed across his screen, mathematical, precise, and utterly non-random. This was no cosmic background radiation or pulsar echo. The signal carried information, organized, structured information. Park reached for his phone and dialed a number he had been told to use only in extraordinary circumstances. "This is Professor Park at Guaxian. I need to speak with Dr. Kim immediately." 24 hours later, Dr. Kim Soo arrived. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from the emergency flight from Jeju Island, where she had been leading a linguistics conference. She set her bag down and walked directly to Park's terminal. "Show me everything," she said. Park nodded and pulled up the recordings. It started 6 days ago. 3 bursts, each identical, separated by exactly 12 hours. Then nothing for 2 days. Then it repeated. Kim leaned forward, her gaze intense. "And you're certain it's not one of ours? Not American, not Chinese?" "The signal originated beyond Neptune's orbit," Park said, "and it uses frequencies no human transmission has ever used." Kim's expression remained neutral, but her shoulders tensed. As Korea's foremost expert in communication systems and theoretical linguistics, she had spent years developing protocols for this exact scenario. Now that it was happening, she felt oddly calm. "I'll need a secure room and complete access to the raw data," she said. The observatory director provided Kim with a small office in the basement. She covered the walls with printouts of the signal patterns and worked through the nights, sleeping only when exhaustion overcame her. Park brought her meals she barely touched. On the 5th day, she found the first pattern, a mathematical sequence that couldn't be coincidental. On the 8th day, she identified what appeared to be a counting system. By the 12th day, she had established basic syntactic structures. When the breakthrough finally came, it happened quickly. Kim was staring at the wall of patterns when something clicked in her mind. She rushed to her computer and began typing frantically, applying a new decryption algorithm she had developed years ago but never had reason to use. The message emerged with terrifying clarity. "To Earth. Nothing can stop what's coming." Kim sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. She checked and rechecked her work, looking for errors, alternative interpretations, anything that might change the meaning. There were none. She called Park immediately. "I've decoded it," she said when he answered. "And there's more than just the words." Within hours, the message had reached the highest levels of government. By nightfall, Kim was on a military transport to Seoul. By morning, she stood before the National Security Council. "The message repeats in what we believe is a standard galactic communication format," Kim explained to the grim-faced officials. "It consists of the primary warning followed by a series of mathematical coordinates and a timeframe indicator." "And you're absolutely certain of your translation?" asked Defense Minister Yoon. "Yes," Kim replied. "The message structure follows logical patterns that leave little room for misinterpretation." "Tell us about these coordinates," said President Cho. Kim displayed a star chart on the large screen. "They point to a position in space approximately 2 astronomical units beyond Pluto's current orbit. As for the time frame, if our conversion is correct, whatever is coming will arrive in approximately 3 months." The room fell silent. "Could this be a hoax?" someone finally asked. Kim shook her head. "The signal originates from deep space. No human technology could have sent it from that distance." "What about the Russians? The Americans?" asked another official. "I've spoken with my counterparts at NASA and ESA," said Park, who had accompanied Kim to the meeting. "They detected the same signal. Their preliminary analysis matches ours." President Cho stood. "Dr. Kim, I'm authorizing you to form a special research team. You'll have unlimited resources. We need to know more about this message and who sent it." As the meeting adjourned, Minister Yoon approached Kim privately. What aren't you telling us, Doctor? Kim hesitated. There's something about the message structure, a signature embedded in the mathematical sequence. It suggests the message was sent in haste, possibly under duress. Meaning? Whoever sent this warning may have been in danger themselves, and if a civilization advanced enough to send interstellar communications feels threatened. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Within days, the message leaked to the public. Despite government efforts to maintain calm, panic spread. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Stock markets crashed. Supermarkets emptied. Kim ignored the chaos, focusing entirely on further decoding efforts. Her team worked around the clock in a secure facility beneath Seoul. They made progress, isolating additional patterns that suggested the message contained more information than initially believed. Exactly 2 weeks after the first decryption, Kim discovered something hidden deeper in the signal, a secondary layer of information encoded within the mathematical sequences. It's like a Russian doll, she explained to her team. The first message was simple enough to be decoded by any technologically advanced civilization. This second layer is more complex, perhaps meant only for those with specific scientific knowledge. As Kim worked on the new patterns, a technician burst into the room. "Doctor, you need to see this." He led her to another terminal displaying real-time data from the deep space array. A new signal was coming in, stronger than before and structured differently. It's using the same carrier frequency, but with a more complex modulation, the technician explained. Kim stared at the screen, her mind racing. This wasn't just a continuation of the first message. This was something new, something urgent. "Record everything," she ordered, "and get me a direct line to the president." Whatever was coming had just announced itself again, and it was coming faster than they had calculated. General Lee pounded his fist on the table, making the holographic display flicker. The orbital defense platform schematics rotated slowly above the conference table, highlighting in red all the sections that remained incomplete. 60 days, he said, his voice tight. That's all we have left. Every platform must be operational by then. Hanjay ran his hand through his disheveled hair. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, and it showed in his bloodshot eyes and the coffee stains on his lab coat. As Korea's leading weapons engineer, he had been tasked with creating something that could defend Earth against an unknown threat from beyond the stars. "General, I understand the urgency, but the power systems are inherently unstable. If we push them beyond 60% capacity, we risk catastrophic failure. And if we don't have these platforms ready, we risk catastrophic extinction," Lee countered. "Find a way to make them stable." Han looked around the room at the team of engineers and scientists watching the exchange. They were the best minds from around the world, people who weeks ago would have never shared their research now working side by side. "We'll need to completely redesign the energy distribution network," Han said finally. "And even then, I can't guarantee it will work." "You have 72 hours to present a viable solution," Lee replied. "The President has authorized unlimited resources. Whatever you need, you'll get." After the meeting, Han walked to the window of the underground facility. Above him, Seoul continued its daily life, though the streets were noticeably emptier than before. Most people were either stockpiling supplies or leaving the cities entirely. The government had managed to prevent complete panic, but fear hung in the air like a heavy fog. In an adjacent wing of the facility, Dr. Kim Soo stared at her computer screen. Data from the alien message scrolled past, each pattern now intimately familiar to her. Yet something still bothered her, something she couldn't quite place. "Dr. Kim, you should get some rest," said her assistant, Yuna. Kim shook her head. "There's something here we're missing." She pointed to a recurring sequence in the message. "See this. It appears 11 times in the transmission. It's too deliberate to be random." "Could it be some kind of identification code?" Yuna suggested. "Maybe." Kim tilted her head, studying the pattern. "Or maybe." She quickly typed a series of commands, applying a different analytical framework to the sequence. The computer processed the data, and new results appeared on the screen. Kim's eyes widened. That's it. 6 hours later, she stood before President Moon and his emergency council. Unlike her previous appearance, when she had delivered the initial terrifying news, Kim now spoke with a different kind of intensity. Mr. President, I believe we've misinterpreted the message. Moon leaned forward. The last weeks had aged him visibly. What do you mean, Dr. Kim? The syntax structure we initially translated as a threat actually contains linguistic markers consistent with urgent warning. In human terms, it's like the difference between saying, I'm coming to harm you, and I'm warning you that harm is coming. Defense Minister Yoon frowned. So you're saying the message itself isn't a threat? I believe it's a warning from a third party, Kim explained. The message contains elements that suggest it was sent hastily, possibly at great risk to the sender. A warning about what? Moon asked. Kim hesitated. That part remains unclear. But I don't think the message senders are our enemy. They're trying to help us prepare for something else. General Lee scoffed. That's a convenient interpretation, Doctor. But we can't base our defense strategy on hope. This isn't hope, General. It's linguistics, Kim replied firmly. The secondary patterns embedded in the message contain what appear to be identification markers, like a signature. These markers repeat in a way that suggests self-identification. They want us to know who they are. President Moon studied Kim's face. If they're not hostile, why not simply say so clearly? Why the cryptic warning? Perhaps they couldn't be more direct, Kim suggested. Or perhaps they were limited by time or circumstances. The transmission bears signs of being cut short, like someone speaking quickly before being interrupted. The room fell silent as the implications settled in. If Dr. Kim is correct, said Science Minister Park slowly, we might not only be facing a threat, but potentially gaining an ally. Or they could be manipulating us to lower our defenses, countered General Lee. Kim nodded. That's possible, but the linguistic patterns are consistent with warning communications across human cultures. There are certain universal elements to how sentient beings convey urgent information to protect others. Moon stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Continue the defense preparations, he ordered. But Dr. Kim, I want you to pursue this angle. If there's a possibility of communication with a non-hostile alien civilization, we need to explore it. As the meeting dispersed, Han approached Kim in the hallway. I heard your theory, he said. Do you really believe we might have an ally out there? Kim smiled tiredly. I believe in the data. And the data suggests whoever sent that message wants to help us. Well, I hope you're right, Han replied. Because my defense platforms won't stop an advanced alien fleet. At best, they might slow them down. Keep working on them anyway, Kim said. If I'm wrong, they'll be all we have. That night, as Kim returned to her analysis, a technician burst into her lab. Doctor, we're picking up a new signal. Kim rushed to the monitoring station. The incoming transmission was using the same carrier wave as the original message, but the pattern was different, more complex, more detailed. It's them again, she whispered. As the computer began processing the new data, Kim felt a strange mix of fear and hope. If she was right, Earth might not be facing this threat alone. But as the first patterns emerged on her screen, she realized the situation was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Get me General Lee and the President, she said urgently. Tell them it's not one alien species we're dealing with, it's two. The alarm sounded throughout Space Command with a shrill, unending wail. Captain Choi jumped from his chair and rushed to the main monitoring station, where his team stared wide-eyed at their screens. Report, he ordered, forcing calm into his voice. Multiple objects have appeared at the edge of the solar system, said the young radar technician. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the display. They just appeared, sir. No approach vector. One moment nothing was there, and the next. The main screen showed 12 massive shapes clustered near Neptune's orbit. Each object was at least 2 kilometers in length, with strange geometries that seemed to shift and change as they moved. "Are the defense platforms tracking them?" Choi asked. "Yes, sir, but—" The technician hesitated. "The targeting systems can't lock on. It's like the objects are somehow slipping between radar pulses." Choi grabbed the secure phone and dialed the emergency command center beneath Seoul. "This is Captain Choi at Space Command. First contact confirmed. Alert level Alpha." Within minutes, the bunker beneath the presidential residence became a storm of activity. General Lee arrived first, followed by the cabinet members and key scientific advisors. "Show me," Lee demanded as he entered the command center. The wall screens displayed the feed from Space Command. The alien vessels had already moved past Neptune and were accelerating toward the inner solar system. "They're moving too fast," muttered Han Ji, who had been summoned from his laboratory. "That's not possible under normal physics." Dr. Kim Soo arrived last, having been flown in by military helicopter from the decoding facility. Her face was pale but composed as she studied the approaching ships. "Are they responding to communication attempts?" she asked. "We've tried all frequencies and formats from the decoding protocols," an officer replied. No response. President Moon entered the room, and everyone stood. "Status report," he said simply. General Lee pointed to the display. 12 unknown vessels approaching from the outer system. Current speed indicates they will reach Earth orbit in approximately 3 hours. Our defense platforms are active but report targeting difficulties. "The platforms wouldn't make a difference anyway," Han said quietly. "Not against technology like that." The room fell silent as they watched the alien fleet advance. The vessels bypassed the automated defenses in the Kuiper Belt without slowing. When they reached Uranus, 3 of the ships broke formation and began a complex maneuver that no human craft could have accomplished. "What are they doing?" asked Defense Minister Yoon. "It looks like a search pattern," Captain Choi suggested, "as if they're looking for something." Dr. Kim's eyes narrowed as she studied the movement. Something about it seemed familiar, a pattern she had seen in the original message. "They're scanning," she said suddenly. "The same frequency patterns from the message are being broadcast by those ships. They're looking for a response." Before she could elaborate, the radar technician's voice came over the speaker system. "New contacts detected. Multiple objects approaching from behind Saturn." The screen showed a new group of vessels emerging from Saturn's shadow. 20 ships, larger than the first group and with a distinctly different design. Where the first group had smooth, almost organic-looking hulls, these new arrivals bristled with what could only be weapon systems. They weren't hiding behind Saturn, Han realized aloud. They just arrived, the same way the first group did. The 2 fleets seemed to notice each other simultaneously. The first group immediately changed formation, creating a defensive screen. The second group accelerated, weapons ports opening along their hulls. What happened next left everyone in the command center speechless. The space between Mars and Jupiter erupted with energies no human had ever witnessed. Beams of light that bent in impossible ways sliced through the vacuum. Shields that distorted reality itself flared around the first group's ships. "My God," whispered President Moon. One of the first group's smaller vessels exploded in a blast that temporarily overloaded Space Command sensors. When the screens cleared, the battle had intensified. The first group was clearly outmatched but fighting desperately. "They're trying to hold position between the second group and Earth," Captain Choi observed. Dr. Kim stared at the screen, her mind racing. The patterns of movement, the positioning, it all aligned with her analysis of the message. "The first arrivals were scouts," she said, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. "They're the ones who sent the warning. They came to help us." "How can you be sure?" General Lee demanded. "Look at their tactics," Kim pointed to the screen. "They're positioning themselves to shield Earth, not attack it. And the signature energy patterns they're using match exactly what we decoded from the message." As if to confirm her theory, 3 of the first group's vessels broke through the battle and accelerated toward Earth, while the others continued engaging the hostile fleet. "They're coming here," said Minister Yoon with alarm. "No," Kim shook her head. "They're retreating to our orbit to make their stand. They're buying us time." A communication officer suddenly raised his hand. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's using the exact frequency Dr. Kim specified in her protocols." The screens flickered, and an image appeared, strange symbols flowing across the display that matched those Kim had been studying for weeks. "I can read this," she said, stepping forward. "They're identifying themselves as the Wren. The others are called the VAC." Her fingers flew across a nearby keyboard, inputting the translation algorithm she had developed. More symbols appeared, and Kim's expression grew grave. "The VAC are a conquering species that has destroyed dozens of civilizations. The Wren have been fighting them for centuries. They sent the warning when they learned Earth was the VAC's next target." "So which ones are the threat?" General Lee asked, though the answer seemed obvious now. "The second group, the VAC," Kim confirmed. "The message was from the Wren. They were trying to help us prepare." She continued translating. "They say they tried to arrive sooner but were delayed by VAC patrols. They're asking for permission to enter Earth orbit to establish a defensive position." President Moon looked at his advisors, then back at the battle raging in space. One of the Wren ships had just been destroyed, but it had taken 2 VAC vessels with it. "Tell them permission granted," he said quietly, "and ask what we can do to help." As Kim began transmitting the response, everyone in the command center watched the screens with a new understanding. Humanity's first contact with alien life had come, not as a single event, but as a glimpse into a larger conflict that had now reached Earth's doorstep. And they were not as alone as they had feared. The United Nations emergency session fell silent as the holographic figure materialized in the center of the assembly hall. Standing 3 meters tall, the alien skin had a metallic sheen that rippled with each movement. Its eyes, 4 black orbs arranged in a diamond pattern, surveyed the gathered world leaders with obvious contempt. "I am Overlord Taz of the Coal Empire," the figure announced, its voice somehow both mechanical and organic. "Your planet has been selected for harvesting. Your resources will serve the expansion of our civilization." President Moon stood from his seat at the Korean delegation. "We wish to negotiate peaceful terms." "There are no negotiations," Taz interrupted. "Only surrender or extinction. Your defenses are primitive. Your technology is laughable. Resistance will only increase your suffering." A hologram displayed images of other worlds, burning cities, shattered continents, oceans boiling away into space. The message was clear. "You have 48 Earth hours to disable all military systems and prepare for our arrival. Those who cooperate will be permitted to live as workers. Those who resist will be eliminated." A hologram vanished, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. In a secure room beneath the UN building, Dr. Kim Soo met with the alien she now knew as Commander Dal of the Mun Defense Fleet. Unlike the towering Cole, Dal stood only slightly taller than an average human. His skin was pale blue, and his large eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost familiar to Kim. "We tried to warn you earlier," Dal said, his words translated through a device on his wrist. "The Cole consume worlds. They've destroyed dozens of civilizations across 3-star clusters. Your warning helped us prepare," Kim assured him. "Without it, we would have had no time at all." Dal made a gesture that Kim had learned indicated regret. "Our fleet is damaged. Of the 12 ships we brought, only 5 remain functional. We cannot defeat the Cole alone." "Then we'll help you," Kim said firmly. Dal's expression shifted to what might have been skepticism. "Your weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Your ships cannot match their speed." "Perhaps not," Kim agreed. "But humans have faced overwhelming odds before." Across the city, Han Jae stood before a group of military leaders from a dozen nations. Sleep-deprived but energized by adrenaline, he pointed to the schematics displayed on the wall screens. "The Cole ships use a quantum-linked shield system," he explained. Our conventional weapons can't penetrate it, but that's not our only option. What are you suggesting? Asked General Lee. They expect us to fight conventionally, Han explained. But what if we don't? What if we fight like humans always have when outmatched? With creativity. Lee studied the young engineer's face. Asymmetric warfare. In space. Exactly, Han nodded eagerly. The Cole rely on their superior technology. They expect direct attacks against their ships. But their arrogance creates blind spots. He pulled up new images, detailed scans of Cole vessels provided by the Mun. Look here and here, Han pointed. Their ships have external sensor arrays that must remain exposed to function. Their propulsion systems vent plasma at regular intervals. These are vulnerabilities we can exploit. With what? Demanded a Russian general. Our missiles can't reach them before being intercepted. Han smiled. Not missiles. Something much smaller. When the plan was presented to Commander Dahl, the Mun officer's expression showed clear disbelief. This strategy is unconventional, he said carefully. That's the point, Dr. Kim replied. The Cole expect a certain type of resistance. We'll give them something entirely different. Dahl studied the human faces around him. Your species cannot win through direct confrontation. Then we won't confront them directly, Kim answered. Humans have a long history of defeating superior forces through unexpected means. The next day, as the Cole's deadline approached, a flurry of activity surrounded Earth's orbital platforms. The Mun provided technology to mask these movements from Cole sensors, but time was running short. Han supervised the modifications personally, floating in zero gravity as technicians transformed what had been defensive weapons into something new. Will it work? General Lee asked, joining Han at the viewport. Theoretically, yes, Han replied. Practically, we'll find out soon. Below them, Earth gleamed blue and white against the blackness of space. Somewhere beyond Mars' orbit, the Cole fleet waited, confident in their victory. 6 hours before the deadline, an emergency meeting convened with military leaders and the Mun allies. Commander Dahl provided the latest intelligence. The Cole have positioned their fleet in standard harvesting formation, he reported. 20 capital ships with support vessels. Their flagship, Overlord Taz's vessel, remains at the center of the formation. Perfect, Han said. That's exactly what we need. President Moon addressed the group. The Security Council has approved the plan. All nations have contributed resources. Commander Dahl, are your ships ready? The Mun officer nodded. We are prepared to play our part, though I must again express my concerns about the viability of this strategy. Noted, Moon replied. But as Dr. Kim has explained, sometimes the most effective approach is one your enemy cannot imagine. As the meeting concluded, Kim found herself standing next to Han in the corridor. Do you really think this will work? She asked quietly. Han hesitated. The math checks out. The physics supports it. But there are so many variables. But sometimes crazy is all you have left, Han finished with a tired smile. And humans are very good at crazy. 3 hours later, as the orbital platforms moved into their final positions, a transmission reached Earth from the Cole flagship. Your deadline has been moved forward, Overlord Taz announced. Surrender now or face immediate destruction. President Moon's response was brief. Humanity chooses to stand. Within minutes, the Cole fleet began to move toward Earth. Their massive ships accelerated with terrifying speed, weapons systems charging. In orbit, Han gave the final command. Execute Operation Trojan. Across Earth's orbital platforms, thousands of tiny objects launched simultaneously, too small for the Cole to consider threats, too numerous to intercept. Each contained a specially designed payload developed using Mun technology and human ingenuity. As the swarm approached the Cole fleet, Commander Dahl watched from his ship, his expression unreadable. Now we see, he said softly, if human creativity is truly as powerful as you believe. The tiny drones approached the coal fleet like a cloud of metal dust. Each one was smaller than a human hand, practically invisible to the massive warship's targeting systems. The coal, with their superior technology, didn't bother to intercept such insignificant objects. They were focused on Earth's orbital platforms, the obvious threat. This was exactly what Han Jay had counted on. In the command center beneath Seoul, Han watched the tactical display with held breath. Beside him, General Lee and Dr. Kim stood silent, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. "First wave has reached target," reported a technician. "Attachment successful." Han nodded. "Begin Phase 2. Across the solar system, the 5 remaining Mun ships suddenly accelerated toward the coal fleet. It seemed like a suicide run. 5 damaged vessels against 20 coal warships. The coal responded predictably, diverting energy to forward shields and charging their main weapons. "They've taken the bait," General Lee said quietly. As the call focused on the approaching Mun ships, the thousands of tiny drones attached to their hulls activated simultaneously. Each contained a tiny quantum resonator, a modified version of the technology Han had been developing for Earth's defense platforms. Individually, they were harmless. Together, they created a cascading disruption that rippled through the coal ship's systems. On the main coal warships, lights flickered. Communication arrays went silent. Navigation systems displayed false information. "Their networks are compromised," announced the technician. "Shield harmonics destabilizing." Han leaned forward. "Launch second wave." From Earth's orbit, 100 modified mining vessels shot forward. Unlike conventional warships, these had been stripped down to minimal systems, just engines, life support, and a specialized drilling apparatus enhanced with Mun technology. Each carried a crew of just 3 volunteers. The coal, struggling with failing systems, couldn't target all of them. Dozens got through, attaching to the hulls of the larger coal ships like parasites. Their drills, designed to bore through asteroids, began cutting into the alien vessels. "It's working," Han Ji exclaimed, pounding the console in excitement. "The mining ships are breaking through." Dr. Kim pointed to a different part of the display. "Look, the Mun are engaging now." The Mun ships, rather than attacking directly, were performing precise strikes on the now vulnerable coal vessels. They targeted propulsion systems and weapons arrays with surgical precision. 3 of the largest coal warships drifted out of formation, their engines dark. Another spun wildly, its navigation systems corrupted by the drone attack. "Overlord Taz's flagship is still operational," General Lee noted, pointing to the massive vessel at the center of the coal formation. "And it's heading straight for Earth." Han nodded grimly. As expected, initiate Phase 3. What happened next was perhaps the most audacious part of the plan. Earth's defense platforms, the very ones Han had struggled to perfect, fired simultaneously, not at the coal flagship, but at precise points in space ahead of it. Gravitational mines deployed, the technician confirmed. The mines were actually modified fusion reactors, each programmed to initiate a controlled collapse. As they detonated, they briefly created intense gravitational distortions, another technology adapted from Mun science. The coal flagship, charging toward Earth, suddenly found itself caught in conflicting gravitational fields. Its shields, designed to repel energy weapons, did nothing against this fundamental warping of space itself. "Their hull is buckling," someone shouted. On the command screens, the massive coal vessel seemed to shudder. Sections of its outer armor crumpled inward as if crushed by an invisible hand. Its weapons went silent. In orbit, the mining ships continued their work. Each had penetrated deep into the coal vessels, their crews placing disruptive devices at critical junctions before retreating. One by one, the mighty coal warships lost power, weapons, or propulsion. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. When it ended, 7 coal ships had been completely disabled. 5 more were severely damaged. The remainder, including the flagship, began a ragged retreat toward the outer solar system. "They're running," General Lee said, disbelief in his voice. "No," Han corrected. "They're regrouping. This isn't over." As if to confirm his words, a transmission cut through the celebratory mood of the command center. Overlord Taz's face appeared on the main screen, his metallic features twisted with rage. "How?" he demanded. "How have you achieved this? Your technology is primitive. Your species is young." General Lee stepped forward. "We're used to being underestimated," he replied simply. The Cole commander's eyes narrowed. "This minor victory means nothing. We will return with a larger fleet. We will." The transmission cut off abruptly as Commander Dal of the Mun stepped into view. "The Cole will not return soon," he said. "We have transmitted data about this battle to other resistance forces throughout the sector. The Cole will be harassed at every jump point on their retreat. They will find no safe harbor to repair their ships." 3 days later, long-range sensors confirmed that the Cole fleet had left the solar system. The threat was not eliminated. Everyone understood this was only a reprieve, but Earth had stood against one of the galaxy's most feared powers and survived. 1 week after the battle, the supreme leader of the Mun arrived in Earth orbit. Unlike Commander Dal, High Commander Jin was old, his blue skin faded to nearly white. He addressed the United Nations in person, standing before the assembly with dignity and respect. "For centuries, we have fought the Cole alone," he told the silent chamber. "We have watched them destroy worlds and consume civilizations. We came to warn you, hoping at best to help you survive a little longer." He paused, looking around at the gathered representatives of humanity. "Instead, you showed us a new way to fight. We have observed many species across the stars, but few with your resilience and ingenuity. The galactic community would benefit from human participation." As Dr. Kim translated these words, she couldn't help but smile. The warning that had once terrified Earth, "Nothing can stop what's coming," had transformed in her mind. It no longer described an unstoppable threat, but humanity itself. In the weeks that followed, Earth began preparations. The Mun provided technology and knowledge, while humans contributed innovation and daring. Together, they strengthened defenses and built new ships. The Cole would return eventually, but when they did, they would face not just the Mun, but humans as well. A species that had proven what they could accomplish when united against a common threat. Han Ji, now heading Earth's new space defense initiative, often found himself looking up at the night sky. Where once he had seen only distant stars, he now saw possibility, danger, and hope intertwined. "They never should have threatened us," he said to Dr. Kim one evening as they watched the first human-Mun collaborative vessel take shape in orbit. "They never understood what makes humans different." "And what's that?" Kim asked. Han smiled. "Nothing can stop us when we're determined. The end